Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Hello?
Can you please put the speaker
Hello?
on?
All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Townsville. Can you hear me okay? Just put your fingers up.
Yes, but we cannot see the
Townsville?
speaker.
Yep, good. Okay. So today we've actually got for the first time this year, a joint seminar, or co-hosted if you like. So this is a terrific idea, and I thank David for approaching me about the suggestion of doing it under the umbrella of not only TESS but also what's it called? It's a long name. It's an awful acronym. The Australian Institute of Tropical Health and Medicine, but also the Australian Tropical Herbarium. So it's actually co-hosted by the three. So today we have a talk about some work that's been undertaken by David, this good-looking bloke behind me over here, and the meticulous curator Frank standing over there from ATH. Actually, I might mention ATH. I had the pleasure yesterday of going to the relaunch of ATH for another 10-year joint venture between James Cook University, CSIRO, and the Queensland State Government for the Australian Tropical Herbarium. So that's a terrific result, and well done to Darren and all the crew for getting another 10 years of support to continue the good work of ATH. Our director, Bill Lawrence, is not very well. He came back from Cambodia with some lurgy thing that they're trying to find out what it is. So he's had some blood tests done. He's supposedly supposed to be resting up, but he keeps sending me emails, so I'm not sure if he's listening to his doctor or not. But anyway, it's an apology from Bill. I thought you were going to be away. Okay, see, it's good to see you. Okay, so apology from Bill. Okay, so today we're going to hear about some work in the Solomon Islands, and we've got two presenters today, which is interesting. We've got Dr. David MacLaren from AITHM, and of course Frank Zich from the ATH, Australian Tropical Herbarium. We've already sent out a bit of a spiel, but just to let you know that David is within the College of Medicine and Dentistry, if that's correct. Mm-hmm. And he's a public health researcher. He's done a lot of work over the years in the Solomon Islands. That's when I first got to hear about his work, when I gave a talk about my work in the Solomons, and also Papua New Guinea. And 25 years now he's been sort of doing work in that area, which is great. And Frank, of course, is the curator, or the meticulous curator of the ATH.
That's Steve's.
Yeah. Obviously, if you're a curator, you've got to be meticulous. There's no other way for it. And I know he's particularly meticulous. Frank has actually been looking after the ATH curatorship for 25 years. Obviously, it wasn't ATH, but that's come more recently. Okay, so I'm not going to prattle on for too long, but today we're going to hear about medicinal plants, traditional knowledge, and conservation management in Kwaio, Solomon Islands. Okay, so hand over to David first. So can you just welcome our two speakers, please?
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with people here this afternoon, and also the people in Townsville. It's great to see everybody coming late in the afternoon, and on behalf of Frank and I, thanks for coming. I'd also like to acknowledge two people who aren't able to be here but have a message that has been video recorded for everybody. Chief Esau Kekeobata and Chief Jackson Waniagia have given permission for us to share this presentation this afternoon. They can't be here, but there's a short video message that we'll be playing at the end of the presentation. So as most people in the room will know, the Solomon Islands is a country to our northeast. It has about 500,000 people, incredibly diverse, almost 80 different languages, across almost 1,000 islands. I've had the good fortune of working on the island of Malaita for over 2 decades. On the island of Malaita, there's about 100,000 people that speak 11 totally different languages. The one language group that I work with are people of the Kwaio language, and they live in the central mountains of Malaita. The Kwaio people of Malaita are unique. And wherever you go in the Solomon Islands, people know about the people of Kwaio because these are the last people to retain the ancestral religion and ancestral culture. More than 95% of people in the Solomon Islands have converted to Christianity, but the Kwaio people are the last language group who have made a deliberate decision to retain many of the ancestral practices and religious practices of pre-Christian Kwaio. Several thousand people live in the remote mountain areas. There is no government in this area. There are no roads, there are no schools, there are no health clinics. People live in small family-run hamlets, and as you can see on the right-hand side, very remote areas. There is no flat land in Kwaio. It's very mountainous. Ancestor worship is at the core of religious practice and cultural belief. And as Christians, we'll pray to their God, or as some people may interact with saints or other deities, the Kwaio interact with ancestral spirits on a day-to-day basis and throughout the day. The distinction between the living and the dead is a very blurry one. And so people in the living realm will interact with the spiritual ancestors on a day-to-day basis. This includes for gardening, for hunting, and if you are sick. Many cultural practices that have been lost in the different languages throughout the Solomon Islands are maintained by Kwaio people. There are cultural feasts and cultural celebrations that happen in the mountains that have been lost in other places around the country. With people who have made a decision like this for more than 100 years, there's been this ongoing struggle between cultural autonomy and introduced ways. And I've had the good fortune of working with people from this community over the last couple of decades to look at how to balance inside and outside ways around health and healthcare. And how do people maintain the ways that they live but access health services in a way that is appropriate. One of the incredible amounts of knowledge that people have in this area are knowledge of plants, animals in the forest that have been lost in other places. Because people live in the forest, because people interact with the forest on a day-by-day basis, there is a lot of knowledge that people use and are maintained in this group that has been lost in other areas. The vast majority of people in the Solomon Islands in the Christianisation process have moved away from small hamlets in the mountains to live in large Christian villages and settlements on the coast. And so very few people in the Solomons actually live in the rainforest. Many of the leaders in this area are very keen to maintain and to share the cultural knowledge and the cultural heritage that they have. And over the last couple of years, a couple of chiefs, namely Chief Iso who you will hear from later, and Chief Jackson Waniagia, have been at the forefront of establishing a cultural centre deep in the rainforest. As you'll see in the middle picture here, you walk through very mountainous terrain for 9 or 10 hours to arrive on a ridge of about 1,000 metres. And there, over the last couple of years, the community have raised some funds to be able to build a modest house in the middle of the rainforest. And this is on the land of the AITHM people, and the structural leadership of the cultural centre mirrors the cultural leadership of that tribe. It's a place that is open for people from other tribal groups to come and share cultural ideas. It's the home of the Kwaio archive. For the last 100, 150 years, there have been researchers, there have been missionaries, there have been colonial government people who have been collecting information, documents, data about people in this group. And there is now a process in place to have all of those documents returned to the community. That's called the Kwaio Archive. And what the leaders want is this cultural centre to be a link to research projects that are in and of Kwaio. So with that background, the Kwaio people think that they need to preserve and maintain cultural knowledge, and that because cultural knowledge is disappearing because of formal government education and changes in way of life. And that the Kwaio Archive project is actively collecting historical and cultural records across many projects. And many Kwaio people have a lot of knowledge about custom medicine from the forest that is unique to this area. At the same time, the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund, a couple of years ago, put out calls for projects in the eastern Melanesian area. So this is an area that covers the New Guinea Islands, the Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu. And this is what the Community Ecosystem Partnership Fund says. As well as being rich in biodiversity, the islands of the hotspot also hold exceptional cultural and linguistic diversity. Because many languages are spoken by only a few hundred people, they are disappearing quickly, leading to rapid erosion of traditional knowledge and practice. This is highly significant in a region where most land and resources are under customary ownership and local people are the true stewards of biodiversity. So there was a unique opportunity of a cultural group who were at the forefront of maintaining and archiving knowledge, and a group that were happy to fund such endeavours. So myself and a couple of people were rank opportunists and thought, great, we can get these things together. And thus was born the Medicinal Plants Research Project. We talked to some chiefs and got the project application together with these people with a few main objectives. So there was a pilot project to document medicinal plants that are found in the rainforest and to build capacity to continue this into the future, to strengthen some capacity to preserve, to photograph and to identify medicinal plants in that area using both Kwaio systems and Western scientific systems, and to strengthen the capacity in project management, organisational governance and financial management of people who live in small hamlets in the middle of the rainforest. So we got some research partners together. So the Cultural Centre was at the very top, obviously. They were driving a lot of this. The Regional Hospital, where we do a lot of our research, we at James Cook University, the Australian Tropical Herbarium, Tropical Health Solutions, colleagues from New South Wales Health, and the University of Michigan are all involved in some aspect of the project. And so we've been able to do a few activities. We're about 9 months in to the project so far, and so I'll just go over some of the activities that have taken place in the last 9 months. So the first thing that we actually did was had a workshop in Kwaio. We sat down with people to think, how do we actually manage this thing? How do we move forward? How are we able to integrate Kwaio worldviews, Kwaio knowledge to be able to sustain this project and to link with particular expertise? And so the initial thing that we did is that we were able to get a list of 15 plants that were used for medicine or for food in Kwaio. Now these 15 plants were not necessarily secret plants or particularly men's business or women's business. This was common knowledge that everybody in the community had. And so this was a good place to start to talk about these plants that everybody had knowledge about. And so after an initial week of sitting down thinking about how we might be able to do that, getting a list of 15 plants, the anthropologist David Aiken from the University of Michigan did some field work. One of the really important parts of this was also a linguistic component, is that David is revising the dictionary of the Kwaio language. So any new words that come up as a part of the biodiversity project will be noted down to be included in the update of the Kwaio dictionary. And we also were able to start collecting some stories and some photographs of those 15 plants. Soon after that, Esau Kekiabata here, who's the chief and driver at the community level, was able to come across here and be hosted by the Australian Tropical Herbarium and work with Frank to get some basic skills on plant collection and preservation and get a bit of an idea about the herbarium and how it would work, and for him to think about how that model might be able to be melded and modified to suit a small house in the middle of the rainforest at 1,000 metres where you can't drive in and out, that you have to walk through some pretty rough places to get to. When he was here, some people heard about him being here, and we got a call from Radio New Zealand International about some of his work, and so he was able to do a radio interview that was then broadcast all around the Pacific about his work here at the herbarium. And then earlier this year, Esau and Waniagia were hosted at the University of Michigan to work with the anthropologists to look at ways to repatriate some of the colonial era documentation back into the Kwaio archive. And that gave us a real opportunity. One is that they travelled through Papua New Guinea and were able to link with an organisation called Partners in Melanesia, which many people in this room may know and may work with, and to talk to those as fellow Melanesians about some of the ways that they are able to interact with their natural environment. And on the way back from the University of Michigan, these two chiefs, again, were able to work with Frank in the Tropical Herbarium to look at some of the techniques. A month after that, Frank and myself and Ben Spear were able to go across, and we did the first ever workshop right up in the mountains in that cultural centre. And we had three aims of what we wanted to do. So the first aim was to look at the proficient use of equipment to collect, to preserve, and to identify some of the medicinal plants. The second thing that we wanted to do was to look at skills to record, to produce, and to preserve stories through photography and video in local language that was able to be left behind in the Kwaio archive. And the third thing that we needed to do is look at ways of project management, organisational and governance, and financial management for a group of people who don't have a bank, who don't have cars, who don't have telephones. And think about how are we able to interact in a way that is appropriate for people at the village level. So the first thing that we did, and Frank will expand on this when I get to sit down, is the proficient use of equipment to collect, to preserve, and to identify some plants. And so you'll see Frank here working with community members to be able to collect some plants. On the right-hand side here, looking at techniques to be able to preserve those plants and to be able to have those in a way that could be preserved. The great thing about this photograph here is that the man holding the plants and teaching the circle of men here is not necessarily Frank. This was Chief Jackson Waniagia, who had visited Frank just a few weeks before. And so he was able to teach with the supervision of Frank in the local cultural centre. And then the identification of those plants. And we can see here a young man writing down a lot of information. Frank and Esau made a template. One side was English and one side was Kwaio language. And so this young man doesn't know how to read and write English, but he's very proficient in reading and writing in his own language. And so we have a bilingual sheet that is able to be written in Kwaio language, all of the specific details that Frank will have and be able to use later on. The second thing that we needed to do was to look at some skills around recording and production and the preservation of stories in photography and video. Now, this is where Professor Rick Spear, who's in the audience here, his son is an incredible photographer and filmmaker, and he volunteered his time to come and help us out. And so here's Ben working with one of our project staff to look at ways of using a camera, both outside and inside, being able to use a video to video stories, even in some conditions that were pretty rough, that is torrential tropical rain and being able to talk with some people. And the third thing was some activities for project management, organisational governance and financial management. Now, what we are doing in the middle photograph here is having a project management meeting. What that means is sitting around a fire in a thatched house with people coming and going, talking about how do we actually engage in taking photographs like this? Who do we train? Who do we want to be able to be involved? The organisational governance was really interesting because when the photographs were taken and the videos were taken, there would be one person who would be in front of the camera, but there would be sometimes 20 or 25 people behind the camera. What that meant was that there was no pre-written scripts that person would recite, but there would be about 25 people with cultural knowledge that would be able to edit in real time. And so if that person didn't give a particular detail, then somebody behind the camera would say, "Hey, George, you also need to talk about this, this and this." Or if they stuffed up a little bit, "Hey, George, that's not quite right, let's do it again." And so there's this fantastic ability to edit in real time and to reshoot in real time. The other thing on the top photograph here is that here is Chief Esau, and he jumped behind the camera to make sure that the shot was exactly what was happening. So it was a really great opportunity. The other thing around financial management that was really interesting was in a collective society, the chief said, let's not pay people, individual people, with money because culturally that's not appropriate. Let's collectively give people a reward for being involved. People needed to come away from their villages, come away from their gardens, come away from their family for a week to be a part of the workshop. And so the collective reward for that was for us as the project team to feed those people some pretty good quality food and for us to buy some local produce from some of the villages to be able to distribute some of that money. And so from a financial management perspective, we learned how to think about financial management on a collective level rather than on an individual level. What I'd like to do now is play a couple of the videos that were produced as a part of this process. On some, but not all of the plants, there was also a demonstration about how they were used. Not only a description of how they were used, but a demonstration about how they were used. Interestingly, when we were talking about medicinal plants, we didn't actually define what medicinal was. We let our local partners define what medicinal was. The first plant, the phalange, was trying to rid the body of another animal, that is, head lice. But Kwaio people, as I mentioned before, also live in a spiritual world. And it was very interesting that people identified some plants that helped them engage on a spiritual level that may not be ridding one of another animal or some kind of sickness, but enable well-being to proceed. And so the next video is talking about well-being. It's a demonstration of a particular tree that is used in a desacralization process. That is, when women give birth, they are sacred. And there is a process of becoming sacred when you give birth to becoming normal, when all post-birth bleeding is finished and you are able to return to the village with your baby. And so that spiritual process and that cultural process is demonstrated in the following video. There's no subtitles here, but at this stage, Chief Esau is talking to the spirits of the ancestors, explaining the process that is about to happen, and asking the spirits of the ancestors to recognise the tree that he's talking to. He will then give it to Tawai, you will see, will spread it on the ground so that the ancestors see that tree being spread on the ground, and then the woman can then walk over the top of that, and the ancestors will see that she can transition. I'd like to hand over to Frank to continue.
Thank you, David. I'll take a step back for a moment and talk about botany within the Solomon Islands. Most countries have a national herbarium, and the Solomon Islands had a herbarium that was initiated during the colonial period. The collection was called the British Solomon Islands Protectorate. There's about 35,000 specimens within the herbarium, but in the civil unrest about 15 years ago, the collection was boxed up to protect it and removed to Fiji for fear that government institutions might have been damaged. So the collection is actually still boxed up and in Fiji, and it's inaccessible and undatabased. And I guess often within the Australian herbarium community, we talk about one of the roles that we could play in helping to re-establish this national herbarium. But the key role of a national herbarium is to provide this botanical expertise, is collect specimens, database them, understand the species diversity and distribution of species. So that's a bit of a gap within the country at the moment. But a lot of the collections of the BSIP collection have been duplicated. At the time of collection, multiple specimens would have been collected of a collection and distributed. Some of those are in Kew. There's a large collection in Papua New Guinea at the Lay Herbarium. And within Australian herbaria, there are many collections as well, most of which aren't databased. But I've did a search of what's called Australia's virtual herbarium here. And at the moment, we have nearly 900 records that are databased and mappable. But for the island of Malaita over here, there's only 4 herbarium records. And for a country with possibly species diversity of 4,000 or more species of flowering plants, I guess, that's very few records. So, as David's mentioned, our role is to participate within training and capacity building in collecting of herbarium specimens, and to engage with the community at the local level, work with them there, as well as host a couple of visits by 2 chiefs. We want to collaborate with them with their local knowledge and contribute and exchange knowledge about sort of Western science from an international perspective. The botany that I deal with would be identification of the species, and once we have an identification, then we can look at that plant in its evolutionary context. What is it related to? How endemic or unique might it be within that flora? And also the distribution, is it very local or more widespread? And with the scientific name on a plant specimen, we have access to all the scientific literature available, as well as more popular literature. So we had, this is a list of some of the Kwaio names on the left there of the 15 and a few images of those ones that we were looking at to illustrate there are a whole range of plants from herbaceous plants to wild bananas to some epiphytes and vines and trees. But I guess at that level, we knew the Kwaio name and their wealth of knowledge about the plants, but we didn't know the scientific name to put with those. I'm going to use the Whalangi as an example, those first two videos that you saw, and I'm going to look at the knowledge that they had and then look at the Western knowledge that we can connect to once we know the scientific name. So we know that it has treatment for head lice once the leaves are heated up. We also know that the hollowed out seeds, as in the mouse there, and also David has an example of the rattle that's used there. And there's a whole host of other traditional knowledge within the Kwaio about the uses. They've got ecological observations about the plants, where they grow, the interactions with other wildlife. And while I was there, the identification was a challenge because the plants weren't flowering or fruiting, the plants that we could find. But I also, there were the Kwaio observations of male plants and female plants, and the male plants that didn't bear fruit and the female plants that did. But I saw and noticed two quite different plants. The leaves were very similar, but there were other aspects of the leaves and branches that were very different. It's a bit hard to see in this photo, but at the base of this leaf petiole is a collar down here, and on this plant there is no collar present, and that is quite a diagnostic feature that was useful. So once we'd returned, David and I had a Skype hookup with Chief Esau and talked to him about this problem in identification, and possibly there are two species involved that they're both calling Whalangi. And we asked if he would be able to head back up into the mountains and look for some flowering or fruiting plants. And these are two of the images that he sent back. This one of some mature and immature fruit, and another image of the other plant without fruit or flowers though. But that was enough for me to really hone in on an identification. This plant on the left here, is within the family Araliaceae and in the genus Osmoxylon, and there's about 41 species in that genus, which occurs from Papua New Guinea into the Western Pacific primarily. And the other plant, which identification was helped by the use of the plant for treating head lice, because it's also used for that exact treatment in other parts of where it occurs, including the Philippines. And this is a family Acariaceae, and the genus and species is Pangium edgili. And there's only one species in that genus. So once we had a scientific name for Whalangi, the one used to treat the head lice, I was able to then access the scientific literature. You can see it in red, the distribution map for the family. This family, as we know it in the botanical and taxonomic world, is relatively recent in the species diversity. There's been a lot of dispute within the botanical community about where some of these species and genera should be placed, and the use of DNA sequences has really helped since 2002, when this paper was published, to take many of these species from a couple of different families and place one of those being Flacourtiaceae and place them within Acariaceae. And it's a very interesting family. Many of the species in the family actually produce these cyanogenic glycosides. So if you start digesting them or chew them or perhaps heating them up over the flames of a fire, cyanide is released from this compound. And if you crush the leaves and you know what cyanide smells like, then you could probably detect it. So a little bit more about the taxonomy of the species, Pangium edgili. the type, which a lot of the botanical community worldwide is compiling images of critical specimens and type specimens. When a species is first named, we designate a collection as the type, and type images throughout the world are being, type specimens are being imaged, and those images are available on the internet. And here I have an image of the type collected in 1828 in Java. And there's a botanical illustration. And the Global Biodiversity Information Facility is pooling database records into a global information system. And here, all those yellow dots in this regional map show the distribution of Pangium edgili. And unfortunately, on this map, we don't have any data for the Solomons, but we do know it's there, obviously. And there's very little data for Java and Indonesia. Also, once we have a name, we can do simple internet searches and also access a wealth of information indicating edibility and other uses of the plant. I focused in on Whalangi as an example there, but we've been able to identify most of the species that we had on our pilot list. David.
So in just 9 months, through a collaboration between people who live in remote mountains, people at a university in Michigan on the other side of the world, Frank and colleagues at the herbarium, and some of us at JCU have been able to get together. And we're quite proud of some of the stuff that we've been able to do. And so at the moment there's a little booklet that is being produced in the Solomons, and that will be bilingual. One page will be in Kwaio language and one will be in English with some of the basic photographs, and hopefully that will then go to the hospital and the health centres in the area to help the health staff there. As you can see, there's some short video clips in Kwaio language. They will be put onto touch screens, and those touch screens can then sit in the cultural centre right in the middle of the rainforest with a solar panel that can charge them up. And if you don't know how to use a computer, that's okay, because with a touch screen you can just see an image of a plant or a leaf that you might want to know about and just touch that image and up pops the video. So for people who have never been interacted with computers or electronic material, that's what we're looking at doing. And as Frank has demonstrated, the archive preserves specimens for each of those 15. One copy in the Kwaio archive, deep in the rainforest, and one copy here, so that there can be a two-way sharing of knowledge. We've also been able to achieve enduring relationships of mutual trust, which is a basis for ongoing projects. Many of my Kwaio friends knew that these plants were in other parts of the Pacific, because when they would go to cultural festivals or they would visit other places, people saw other cultural groups dancing with these shells, and so they knew that these plants must be in other places. When Frank was able to show that map with those little dots, that this tree was also all over Papua New Guinea, they said, "We knew that, but now we can see where they are." And so their ability to be able to share that knowledge, and they said, "Frank, how can we get a little yellow dot on Solomon Islands? Because we've got it too." And so the ability for local knowledge to be shared internationally was a really unique opportunity. So in summary, this is a little quote that Frank and I pulled out, saying that while conserving nature alongside human cultures presents unique challenges, we suggest that any hope of saving biological diversity is predicated on a concomitant effort to appreciate and protect cultural diversity, because it's because of the cultural diversity, the cultural knowledge and the pride in that that's at the basis of this. So what we see as some potentials in the way forward is some ongoing collaboration and exchange so that we can learn from each other again. that building capacity and training for us here at the university, at the herbarium, to be able to work at the village, and also building capacity and training for people at the village level to be able to engage in the herbarium and other places, to be able to further document some plant biodiversity, occurrence, distribution and discovery of different plants, and the documentation of traditional knowledge and link to Western scientific knowledge. Now, one of the really interesting things that quite unexpectedly popped up, I'm not sure if there's any mammal experts in the room, but many people would probably know this book by Tim Flannery, who did a survey of mammals in the Pacific in the 80s. And in this book, he claims that the Malaita giant rat is extinct. When we're talking about plants, I talked to Chief Esau and he said, the giant Malaita rat's not extinct. I saw a pair a couple of years ago, way deep in the forest where nobody lives, when I was hunting. And so I was then really excited and got back and emailed Tim Flannery and said, hey, you know that in your book you said it extinct. One of my friends saw one a couple of years ago. And so then he said, oh, one of my colleagues in the Smithsonian is really interested in that, and flicked my email onto him. And so here we are doing a project about medicinal plants, and all of a sudden here comes this unique opportunity that a species that is thought and is stated to be extinct might not be extinct, and we might be able to find some evidence that it's still alive. And so in July, when we go back to continue work, we might be able to use the camera that we bought to take photos of plants to take a photo of this animal, if it's still alive. The last word goes to our friends, our colleagues from the Kwaio Cultural Centre. And so I'd like to finish we would like to finish the presentation with our friends and our colleagues.
Some people know and some people didn't. My name is Wanake and this is my land and this is my place. I'm a founder and also I want to establish the Kwaio Cultural Center here for future generation and also for old people and also for future generation for Kwaio. This year, we got a trip to the US. The main purpose of going to the US is to collect all the information about Kwaio, and I did it. And then I come back with all the information, the historical information, and all the information is in the computer now, and all the information is here in Kwaio at the moment. And on the way back, I come down and spend a few days in Cairns and talk with Frank and also talk with Rick and make a link with especially James Cook University. And then we have a very good conversation. And during that time, we make an arrangement for Frank and Ben and David to come here. And again, I was saying that they're going to come or not. I got a question in my mind. But this afternoon, I was excited because the people where I really talk with them, they come and present here today. So this is amazing to me. And I was really excited this afternoon, and I was really happy this afternoon to express my thought. Ngayon, hindi na MacLaren, Benny, Parang, wala na alam na ko lang hindi na mapakatawa. Wala na kayo ito meron pa rin na meron. With David MacLaren, Ben and Frank, when we come here, we fulfill that dream. Because even though it's raining, but we're going out in the forest, we collect a specimen, we took the photos. So this is a big deal for us. May nakalay na kumanda din mga ano lagi, naman lang sa kapwa yung pilihan ay marunong na namin, pwede punyayang, pwede buruan, pwede natin bumili na is, o na namin, magilaan din may sa pinag na orang utama na namin, o naman bilay na rumaan. So they want to this one. Like for me, I've not got the background of education, however, but I got the knowledge for my people. And I was thinking about, like, I really want to make a link with Zich University, because I can see the real thing now, and also the real thing for the future of this young generation here in Kwaio. So I was really happy. Ngayon na doon na buwan na ako may ko na is ako na ko na ino buwan ini no lang ko na uta niya kay mga na mo di ba de kana yung mga anilala para sa may panunod. Even for my family, my friend, we don't know about the outside world, but now I believe that we can work together and for the future. And we can see the change or the difference can happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. You might just stand in camera. Well, I'm not sure if we're going to get cut off, so we'll just go to Townsville first. Any questions from there? You might need to get near a microphone. Any questions from Townsville? Nothing at the moment? Okay, we'll come back to you. We're all sort of satisfied down there. Okay, so questions here for either David or for Frank. First, and then we'll come here. Mark first.
Okay, obviously an important part of all of this is trust. You know, they've obviously been living up with it for quite a while. They've managed to keep their culture and their own processes intact. And then, so they've done it in the past. How do you see that happening in the future, given this sort of thing exposes them to the outside world? More people want to come in and see what's going on and how to experiment and collect stuff. And how do you see that being managed in the future?
Yeah, thanks. Really good question. Sorry, for the Townsville people, the question was, this is all very nice, but is this going to change people by having people coming in from the outside world? That's a good paraphrase, I hope. Okay. One of the things that I didn't say was that the Kwaio people are not a group of people who have been lost in the rainforest and just 5 years ago walked out and go, wow, there's a world out here. The Kwaio people as a group have been actively engaging with the outside world for the last 130 years. Many people who belong to the South Sea Island community in Queensland have roots back to Malaita. People from this language group were stolen to come to Mackay, to come to Bundaberg, to come to the Burdekin, to come to everywhere there is sugarcane. People in these very remote areas can probably tell you a better history of Queensland than most people in this room. 90% of men who uphold ancestral religion have travelled outside of their mountain homes. They have worked on plantations, they've worked on ships, they've worked in stores, they've engaged with the outside world. So the way that they live is a deliberate decision. It's not an accident of history. and the deliberate decisions that they have made to be able to maintain their ways of life and these traditions is a deliberate decision. Most people who engage in the development paradigm or the Christianisation paradigm have been saying for the last 80 years that the Kwaio will die out, that they will become Christian, that they will change. That hasn't happened. The future, I can't see the future, but having that as a foundation and having things like the Kwaio Cultural Centre, where if you walk there, you need to eat what they give you. You need to follow the taboos and the processes that are there, mean that there is a cultural pride and autonomy that is there. The future, who knows? But having that as a foundation gives me hope that that spirit will continue.
Repeat your question here. When are you going back? How long are you going to stay? And where do you stay? And what do you eat?
Okay. I'll be back in about 6 weeks, as will 3 other people in this room. Where I stay with my friends. That means staying in a thatched house with a mud floor and a fire and with pigs walking around, with some people wearing clothes and some people not. That there will be a traditional women's house where the menstrual processes happen, that there will be a traditional men's house and a sacrificial area where people will sacrifice pigs to their ancestors. And so we will stay with people in those hamlets. They will feed us sweet potato, they will feed us taro, they will feed us pork that's cooked in bamboo. They will feed us some watercress that they might harvest out of the creek, or some insects that they collect on the forest as they're walking between villages. So that's where we'll stay and that's what we'll eat.
And it sounds pretty healthy, actually.
Interestingly, Esau, who was the one speaking English there, he's also a village health worker. In the mountains, he's worked as a village health worker for the last 28 years. He's never seen a single case of diabetes. However, the flip side of that is that everybody's got stuffed knees and a buggered back because you're walking up and down and you're carrying 20 kilos of sweet potatoes on your head, going up and down to the garden every day with a child on there, and then probably another 5 kilos of firewood coming and going. So it's not some fantastic paradise where there are no health issues. There are very serious health issues, but they are just health issues that reflect the way people live there.
Malaria, or they're too high up for malaria?
Too high for malaria, but some really good news is that on the coast there's been a dramatic decrease in malaria over the last 5 or 6 years.
Andrew?
Just one sort of passing comment, but I'm guessing too that in those huts people probably get lung disease too, because they're usually pretty smoky.
Absolutely.
The passing comment was that, and I know it's partly for Frank, I'm not sure whether that plant, the lung, is related to Aboriginals here.
No.
No, okay. But that's another cyanogen. I had a student working on that and delivery, and we found that never ate the young leaves. And they turned out to be 10 times higher in cyanides than the older leaves. So that detail that the guy gave about how you use young leaves, I'd be guessing that that's associated with
age. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just pick up on one? Yes, severe problems with indoor air pollution and tuberculosis. There's a real hotspot for tuberculosis in these areas because there's a lot of people living in a small house that's not very ventilated and a lot of indoor air pollution. And so perfect conditions for tuberculosis to be able to transmit very efficiently.
Stuart?
Yeah, so people are trying to engage with the outside world with modernity on their own terms, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people around the world trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if this is a hypothetical situation or not. What if one of the plants, has a compound that's not common like cyanide, but which is quite rare and which has commercial potential? Where would the Solomons and the
biodiversity, indigenous rights.
Yeah, I think I'm obviously not an expert in that area, but I think, is the Solomons a signatory? Does anyone know? Up the back there to the convention? No. So, yeah. I think there would be protections, and there would be a way of I think the Department of Environment of the Solomons would hopefully engage in a joint venture with any agent sort of company wanting to commercialise it. Yeah, I don't really know.
Okay, you got the last question, but I've got a question up the back, and then
I just
we'll...
want to make a comment about Stuart's question. So one of the things we've got is about transparency of the website. So I was for research for a website, and we've put up stories about anything going on where someone comes or goes. Also share that online with online forums. So Solomon Islands who are internationally want to talk about their country or people that belong to a few forums. And that's been an issue that's come up for people who don't know the process. But once people understand that it was the Chiefs that invited JCU and the Australian Bavarian to be partners, not us going and seeking out potential wealth and riches, the tone changed in the conversation. So it's been quite an important communication process, actually managing some of that. So we've had Esau on Facebook doing some messaging saying, I'm Chief Esau and you can come and talk to me, but we actually invited these guys, and then I'll put up links to some of the documents we've got. And so it's just been a process of ongoing communication, because I think it looks the potential for exploitation, and I think they are in symmetry to the Solomon Islands, but the potential for exploitation is obviously huge. Again, like we're talking about trust, that relationship is really going to be central to how any knowledge that's discovered is managed, and it's also ongoing conversations. This is a pilot, hoping to be putting another application to IUCN and getting some more money to do some more work and expand it, and I think those are the kind of conversations that we need to have. But we're having conversations about it, but once people know, in Solomons particularly, they know the process, there's no conflict around what's going on.
Thanks, Michelle. Can you have the last question, then we'll wind up for the session? Thank you.
Yeah, well, I guess my question initially was a bit about the IP, about the knowledge, but it's just been covered. I was also curious, you showed us use of two of the 15. What were the remaining?
A whole range, as Frank said, there was a whole range, and everything from uses from diarrhoea to childbirth to eye infections to infectious fungal infections, and then other plants that engage in a more spiritual process. But again, these are not secret spiritual processes. These are open processes that everybody will know about. And kind of coming back to the question here, is the 15 plants that were chosen were deliberately chosen because this was common open knowledge that everybody should have, and it was filmed in an open way. And so this was kind of open knowledge. Frank, you might be able to kind of say from a biologist perspective that the range?
Yeah, and I think an additional use was as food. There were plants that were used as food sources. Several starchy foods mostly. Yeah, but leaf vegetables.
Okay, well, this has been a terrific seminar. Can we thank both David and Frank for their presentation, please?